Let me just pull up. Is my opponent ready? Is my partner ready? Then I will begin. My partner and I stand firmly on the affirmative side of the following resolution. On balance, societies benefit from religious belief and practice. Definitions. On balance, after considering the power and influence of both sides of question. Religious beliefs. Any sincerely held belief or information for, against, or in conjunction with a theistic, agnostic, or atheistic assumption, presumption, or position of a religious doctrine, dogma, or practice of regardless of whether not the belief or information is endorsed by any other person or public or private entity. Religious practices, a term including practices and observances such as attending worship services, wearing religious symbols, praying at prescribed times, displaying religious objects, adhering to certain dietary rules, and refraining from certain activities. Religious practices, a term including practices and observances such, I just said that one. Society, a community, nation, or broad grouping of having people in common traditions, institutions, and collective activities and interests. Benefits, something that produces good or helpful results or effect that promotes a well-being. Contention 1, mental health. Through religious practices and beliefs, it can strengthen one's mental health. Faith can also shape morals and values of people who are no longer religious. Religious duns are people who were once religious but no longer are. In 2019, a survey was conducted which said that 44% of Americans, along with 45% of people across 34 nations, believe in God is necessary to be moral and have good values. Although there has been evidence showing that religious duns still use the same morals even when they were religious. Quote, the consistently religious are more likely than the duns to endorse each moral foundation, and the religious duns are more likely to endorse them than the consistently non-religious, end quote. Even if one is being done with religion, they are still likely to use similar morals more than people who are never religious at all. Being involved with religion has led to less crime rate, which also helps our economy. Quote, religious participation by kids has shown to result in less juvenile delinquency, less drugs use, indicating smoking, better school attendance, and a higher probability of graduating from high school. Graduating from high school has a large positive economic impact, so that is a big benefit to saving the economy. Less juvenile delinquency has also provide big savings through the avoided costs of incarceration and rehabilitation. With a positive mindset from religion, followers have committed less crimes and have become better as a community through this. Religion has a huge impact on people by bettering the behaviors which starts mentally. Contention 2, other health benefits. More than just mental health, religion also has an effect on physical health. There are many benefits to being religious. Regular attendance at religious services is linked to a healthy, stable family life, strong marriages, and well-behaved children. The practice of religion also leads to the reduction in incidents of domestic abuse, crime, substance abuse, and addiction. In addition, religious practice has led to an increase on physical and mental health. Quote, decades of research indicates that higher level of religious involvement has been associated with a reduced likelihood of abusing alcohol or drugs. The relationship between religious practice and the avoidance or moderate use of alcohol is well documented. Whether or not a denominational tenets specifically prohibit the use of alcohol. Alcohol is also a drug that can ruin someone's life. Religion can lead to someone away from a lifestyle with the ways it is viewed in their religion. Societies benefit from religious beliefs and practices shown through the ways religion has an impact on one's health.
All right.
Can we read our case now?
Are my opponents ready?
Yes, Cyan, just so you know, you're a little quiet.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Is my partner ready? And I will begin. My partner, oh, sorry, I'm gonna grab my timer first. Okay. My partner and I stand in firm negation of the resolution resolved. On balance, societies benefit from religious belief and practice. On balance, to take all matters into consideration, benefit, a good or helpful result. Religion, the entire collection of beliefs, values, and practices that a group holds to be true and sacred. Belief, an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. Practice, the actual application or use of an idea. Contention 1, division. Religious beliefs and practices can cause division in a society. According to the Pew Research Center on November 15th, 2019, 37% of Americans say that churches and other houses of worship currently have too much influence in politics. Division is something that the United States struggles with greatly, and religious beliefs and practices only make it worse. We need to work towards division, but religious beliefs and practices do not provide that. Subpoint A, wars. Religious beliefs and practices can lead to wars, and it has in the past. According to Luck Reichler in the International Journal of Peace Studies in January 1997, since the awakening of religion, wars have been fought in the name of different gods and goddesses. Still, today's most violent conflicts contain religious elements linked up with ethno-national, interstate, economic, territorial, cultural, and other issues. Many people fight wars on the basis that one religion is better than another, which is detrimental to society. Also, a great deal of the wars being fought today harm society because they often end up being tied to a religious belief or practice. According to the New York Times on May 19th, 2017, since the North-South conflicts in Sudan have been cast in religious terms, they developed the semblance of deep value conflicts which appear unresolvable except by force or separation. Religious beliefs and practices can be extremely detrimental to society and ongoing conflicts. Even though the wars might not have been fought for religious reasons, religion still comes into the issue. According to the New York Times on May 19th, 2017, to further their interest in religious organizations, they also make use of low-scale violence, political repression, and terrorism. As we can see, these religious organizations are going to use violence for their gain, which is not moral and needs to be fought against. But religious beliefs and practices make society worse by deepening the issues and entrenching religion in them. According to Luck Reichler in the International Journal of Peace Studies in January 1997, Christian fundamentalists in the US cater a manifest theology, a fundamentally mankind worldview in which we are right and all civil and aggressive intentions are projected to them. Our society needs to move away from the us versus them argument, but religious ideas push the idea that one person has to be right, creating this us versus them argument. Contention 2, censorship. Religious beliefs and practices encourage censorship because they want all texts to fit and align with religious beliefs. According to Rob Boston in American United on March 10th, 2021, the historical cases of censorship in the US follow a familiar pattern. Usually, a religious organization, member of the clergy, would get worked up about a book and demand local merchants stop selling it. Government officials would apply pressure and the book would disappear. This censorship is going to have a negative impact on the society, which is why we can see that religious beliefs and practices do not benefit society. According to Censorship in America, religious censorship is defined as the act of suppressing views that are contrary to those of an organized religion. The censored work being viewed as obscene, challenging a dogma, or violating a religious taboo. Is bad in any context, and religion encourages this. This is why my partner and I see no other ballot than that of the negation. Thank you.
Okay, since you guys are AF, you guys have first question. We'll begin whenever you're ready.
May I ask the first question if my partner is okay with that?
She nodded.
I can't see anyone, sorry. So I'll begin that right now. In your case, you said that a certain conflict was, quote, unresolvable except by force or separation. Can you elaborate on that, both what the conflict is and why it is that way?
Okay, so what we were talking about was the North-South conflicts in Sudan that have been cast in religious terms. They develop the semblance of deep value conflicts, which appear unresolvable except by force or separation. So it's like this appearance, and it's just saying that like religious entrenched this further. Does that make sense? Okay, I have a question for you guys then, if that's okay with my partner. Then with your contention 1 of mental health, you're saying that 45% of people say you need God to be moral, but don't you think that like religion can also be a detriment to mental health for those who may be part of the LGBTQ community and are shunned out?
I think under certain cases, yes, but also there are many religions that do not practice hate towards the LGBTQ community. There are definitely some religious people that do, but overall, the institutions themselves are improving in those areas.
And then could I have the next question?
Go for it.
In your guys' second sub point, what were the wars that are being fought today?
Or
Like-
subpoint A of wars.
Yes. I think you mentioned that are wars being fought today. Could you like elaborate on what those are?
One of that is the North-South conflict in Sudan. And one of them too is there's Christian fundamentalists in the US cater a manifest theology, a fundamental Machian worldview in which we are all right. But the idea is not that like there's always just continuous wars, as we can see with the example in Sudan, but it's that continuous wars between others as they fight over if their religion is true or not. Zion, do you have a question?
Yes. So you mentioned how religion results in a lower crime rate, and you mostly talk about juvenile delinquency. Is this only apparent in children, or does this also affect the adults in society?
We just have evidence for juvenile delinquency, so I'm not sure for that question.
Thank you.
In our case, we specifically only talked about juvenile delinquency, but we also have evidence that suggests that things like domestic abuse and drug abuse among adults is also reduced, and especially illegal drugs or yeah, I don't know.
Can you
Kinda
read that
an-
as an evidence, please?
I scrolled too far down in my thing. Okay. Um,
That's time, but if you are okay with reading it, that's cool too.
Okay. Let me find this.
Okay.
Um, okay. Here we have from heritage.org in 2006. Religiously involved individuals are less likely to carry or use weapons, fight, or exhibit violent behavior. This especially extends to within their family. End quote. And then we also have from a different article from heritage.org in 2006, talking about how religion and marriage, and how, quote, there are many indications that the combination of religious practice and stable marital relationships contributes to a strong and successful next generation. And it continues to talk about physical, intellectual, mental, and emotional health of men, women, and children.
Okay, thank you. And then it's the asks constructive.
Not constructive, but attacks.
Oh, attacks. I apologize.
So I'll begin that on my first word. I would like to begin by attacking my opponent's case, and I'll begin with their first contention of division. Hackett in 2019 stated, quote, when it comes to measuring civic participation, the results again follow a pattern. On balance, people who are actively religious are also more likely to be active in voluntary and community groups, end quote. This is showing that people who are actively religious and are consistently religious are more likely to be together with other people in their communities, even in non-religious groups, even in voluntary and community groups, and that leads to not more division, but actually a lack of division. Moving on to attack my opponent's subpoint A of wars, specifically conflict. Okay, Reichler in 1997 talked about how religions can actually quell conflict. They said, quote, several factors endow religions and religious organizations with a great and underutilized potential for reconstructive management. First, more than 2/3 of the world population belongs to religion. In 1992, 29.2% of the constituency was Christian, 17.9% was Muslim, 13% was Hindu, 5.7% was Buddhist or Shintoist, 0.7% followed Confucianism or Taoist. Together, all these religions of the world have a huge infrastructure with a communication network reaching to all corners of the world. End quote. Later in this, it also talks about how they have the capacity to motivate and mobilize people who are for a more peaceful world. This is proving that those who are religious and people who are in religious institutions are more likely to actually quell conflict and to halt conflict than they are to provide more conflict. And then not just towards wars, but later in my opponent's first subpoint, they talked about low-scale violence. I have a different piece of evidence for that from USIP.org in January of 2006. It says, quote, "The post-September 11th world is seized with the dangers of religious extremism and the conflicts between religious communities, particularly between two or more of the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The threat of religious extremism is real and well documented. The connection between religion and conflict is in the process of being thoroughly explored. However, to the extent that hyperbole and exaggeration are commonplace," end quote. What this is saying is that violence is still being put onto Abrahamic faiths such as Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, even if it is not real and even if it is being exaggerated, which is a very common thing that we have found, especially after the events taken place on September 11th of 2001. And this is saying that many impacts of religion tend to be downplayed or even neglected entirely, even though religions can be used towards peacemaking and can halt violent crime in smaller communities. And then lastly, towards my opponent's last contention or last subpoint of censorship, my opponent stated they stated that censorship was bad and it was going to harden these communities that had clergymen halting the production of books in their places, but they did not provide evidence towards saying that it is bad. For these reasons and many more, I see no other ballot than that on the side of the affirmation.
Okay, we just have the 10-minute timer pop up, so after we do our constructive, you guys want to hop on another Zoom?
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna take a minute of prep time starting now. Okay, that was 45 seconds, so my partner and I have 2 minutes and 15 seconds left of prep. I think everyone's ready. Miss Briggs doesn't like when we ask them, so I'm just gonna go. Starting now. So the first thing that I like to talk about is my opponent's contention, one of mental health. Our opponents say that religion can shape mental health, and 45 of people say you need God to be moral. But as we can see, people have morality without God, and that religion doesn't need to be that main aspect of it. Also, when asked in cross-examination if religion can hurt people's mental health, as seen with the LGBTQ community, our opponents agreed that some cases yes, but it's not all people and not all institutions. But what I would like to point out is that these religious beliefs and practices are leading to this discrimination against people and leading to this negative mental health, as they aren't getting the support that is necessary and that they need. Therefore, our opponent's contention, one of mental health, cannot still stand. But also moving on to the same part in that contention, our opponents say that religious participation leads to doing less drugs, and they provide evidence for juvenile delinquencies and that people are less likely to use weapons. But as we can see in our case, religious participation actually leads to division. As according to the Pew Research Center on November 15, 2019, 37% of Americans say that church and other houses of worship currently have too much influence in politics. So what we can see is that it's going to create a negative mental health as it's creating this division between people, which can't be beneficial to society. Also, our opponents say that followers have committed less crime. And yes, people who might say that they're actively religious, might commit less crime, but these religious beliefs and practices are still harming society, as we can see with our contention 1 of division, or subpoint A of wars, and our contention 2 of censorship, which outweighs the small benefit that would be done to some people's mental health, not even everyone's mental health. Therefore, our opponent's contention 1 falls. Moving on to our opponent's contention 2 of other health benefits. Our opponents say that there are well-behaved kids and less substance abuse, and alcohol can lead someone to a bad path, but religion combats this. But we need to look at the negative impacts as we've mentioned. First of all, we can't even say that religion causes these health benefits, because that's just a correlation. We can't say for positive that it's a causation, because correlation does not mean causation. And a lot of it just might be people who, just because they go to church, they do other things in their life. Doesn't mean that religion is the causing factor of that. And we need to look at the negative impacts as we outlined in our case. Therefore, our opponent's contention 2 falls. Moving on to our case. So for our contention 1 of division, our opponent says when it comes to measuring religious groups, religious groups are more active in their communities. But as we've combated, 37%, according to the Pew Research Center, 37% of Americans say that they have too much influence in politics, which means that there's causing division. So even though they might be active in these communities, that's still a negative impact. And if they're active in these communities, it has to be active towards it, that it is influential, and I don't disagree with that, but I do disagree with the fact that it doesn't cause division, and they're going to be active in their certain groups. Because our opponents only read evidence that they'd be more active in their communities. Therefore, our contention 1 of division still stands. For our subpoint A of wars, our opponent read evidence that said religions can quell conflict, but according to Luck Reichler in the International New Journal of Studies of Peace Studies in January 1977, quote, "Since the awakening of religion, wars have been fought in the name of different gods and goddesses. Still, today's most violent conflict contains religious elements linked up with ethno-national, interstate, economic, territorial, cultural, and other issues." So what we can see from this is that there very much still are wars being fought because of religion, and they're not going to still have these moral ideas because they're actually going against one another. Someone who might be a different religion is going to fight with another religion because their religion doesn't match up, and they believe that there's one true religion, which is just going to cause more wars and division. Therefore, subpoint A falls. For contention 2 of censorship, our opponent said that we didn't have evidence, but we read in our contention 2 that according to Rob Boston, the historical cases of censorship in the U.S. follow a similar pattern. Usually a religious organization or member of the clergy would get worked up. That's all the time I have, but and for these reasons and many more, I urge a ballot and that of negation. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop the Zoom, and I'll send you guys another one.